Hello and good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Stephanie Ventura and I'm the Director of Education with the Ontario Association of Residence Councils, also known as the OARC, and your host for this webinar. OARC's webinars cover themes and topics suggested directly by you, the residents of Ontario's long-term care homes, and from the people who help to support the involvement of residents in their long-term care homes and communities. Today's topic is timed for National Nutrition Month, an annual campaign created by the Dietitians of Canada, and inspired by residents who remind us daily of the importance and positive impact on quality of life that a good meal and mealtime experience can have. Please join me in a land acknowledgement. Today, let us now pause as we acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today, from wherever we are virtually participating in today's meeting. Let us take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land we each call home. We do this to affirm our commitment and responsibility to improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. We acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people who call this nation home. Let us now join in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how each of us in our own way can move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. This webinar is being recorded today, and a copy of the slides as well as a recorded version of the presentation will be made available on OARC's website. The chat feature is disabled for today's session. However, we encourage you to submit questions through the Q&A box. We're looking forward to hearing from you and to sharing your comments, questions, and ideas with our audience at the end of the presentation. And now I'd love to have the pleasure of introducing Heather Toll, who is our presenter for this webinar. Heather is a registered dietitian with the College of Dietitians of Ontario. Heather completed her Bachelor of Applied Science in Food and Nutrition at Toronto's Metropolitan University in 2004. With nearly 20 years of experience as a registered dietitian practicing within long-term care homes, Heather has a passion for geriatric nutrition and working with residents to enhance food enjoyment, assist with intake challenges, and help residents achieve their goals of care. Heather has a passion for helping residents navigate complex nutrition and hydration challenges while still enhancing quality of life. Heather is a member of the Ontario Seniors Nutrition and Advocacy Committee, OSNAC, and the registered dietitian at Hillsdale Terraces Long-Term Care Facility in the regional municipality of Durham. Heather is a return guest with OARC, and we're so pleased to have you here again today to talk about this important topic with our audience. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I really appreciate it. OSNAC has really cherished our partnership with the OARC. So thank you so much for having us again. Just looking at what we're going to cover today, we've kind of divided the presentation into two components. We're going to focus first on advocacy. So we're going to look at who OSNAC is, and we also have kind of a focus group team called FNAT, the Food and Nutrition Advisory Team. So we're just going to provide a little bit of an overview on who we are. And we're going to talk a bit about some accomplishments that we've had as an advocacy team, as well as our current focus in the kind of realm of advocacy related to food services, nutrition, and hydration. in long-term care. And then I'll also talk a bit about how can residents get involved? How can residents and staff be a little bit more involved in the food service advocacy piece? And then we're going to switch gears and talk about education, and more of an education component. We're going to look at an overview of long-term care food systems just to help provide some insight for those that may not have an understanding of how that works. Talk a little bit about food funding and kind of purchasing practices. And the food funding piece ties into our advocacy discussion as well, because that's something that OSNAC is currently focused on. And then talk a little bit about food waste. I know that's often a hot topic. How can we reduce food waste in general? So looking at the challenges that we face, what are some of the impacts, and then some ways that maybe some homes can improve on food waste in general, or at least explore some options to look at that. And then we'll have some opportunity to review those Q&A, just have a discussion about the Q&As that come through. Next slide. Thank you. So OSNAC is, I'll refer to the Ontario Seniors Nutrition and Advocacy Committee as OSNAC moving forward because it is a mouthful, but OSNAC has been around for quite some time, but we did go through a name change. We were known as the Dietitians of Canada Ontario Long-Term Care Action Group at one point. And then in 2020, we formed into OSNAC. We have quite a few members, I think around 15 or so members, and all of us are volunteer. We all work within the sector in some capacity. We have registered dietitians as well as nutrition managers that are involved in OSNAC. And then we do have another group that we've created, which is just a kind of a focus group from that original large committee that focuses on meetings with the Ministry of Long-Term Care, as well as discussions about regulation and funding changes in the sector, or encouraging and advocating for that. So that's why there's two groups listed there. And we all have quite a bit of experience working in the sector and focus on educating, empowering, and advocating. So if we look at that a little bit more deeply, our purpose is to enhance quality of care, looking at advocating within the sector for long-term care home residents and staff. What are the needs in the sector with regards to food services, and where can we help to advocate to push for change? We also want to focus on education, so raising awareness about nutrition and seniors care. And then we also want to try to empower those that are residents of long-term care homes, as well as those working in long-term care homes, to speak up, to provide feedback, and to help push for change within the sector as well. Some of our partnerships that we have, we work with partners at quite a few different levels. So we do work directly with the Ministry of Long-Term Care in some capacity. We do provide some insight as subject matter experts in the food service realm, and work with them to support regulation adjustments where possible. And then we also work with other long-term care sector leaders, such as OLTCA and Advantage. We have other partners through that are educators and other support organizations. And then we also work directly with homes when needed. They can submit questions through our website or our email. We can provide them with feedback, and they can share their experiences from the front line. And then also working closely as we can with families and residents themselves, working with OARC and Family Councils Ontario, which has been great partnerships. Next slide. So we've been quite busy. OSNAC has been quite busy for a number of years. So I can't talk about everything that we're involved in, but I'm going to just highlight some of the key areas we've been working on most recently, and then we're going to talk a bit about where our focus currently lies. So we've been focusing a lot on the education component, the education piece. We've been working with the ministry directly, which has been wonderful for us to provide some education to inspectors that come into the homes. And we provide education, I believe we've done that for new hires when they're learning about the food and nutrition programs within long-term care and the regulations that are tied to that, providing education for them to help with enhancing interpretation. There's obviously still some ways to go there, so we're hoping to continue to work on that partnership. And we've been providing webinars and other presentations to different sector groups. And again, we're so appreciative of this partnership with OARC, and so we can provide webinars whenever possible to help educate. And then again, collaborating with other groups within the sector, like the Gerontology Network, Dietitians of Canada, and other universities, and so on. We've worked on some regulation changes. In the last few years, the menu flexibility changes have come through OSNAC. It was a suggestion to provide some flexibility to homes to enhance choice, but then also have a little bit more control over the way a menu is developed. It's not mandatory to change, but it's just allowing additional flexibility when planning a menu to support what residents would like and enhancing choice wherever possible. And then we also worked on regulation wording changes for dietitians within the sector. The previous wording didn't allow for virtual consults for dietitians. And obviously the best practice would be the dietitian being in the long-term care home and providing support. But when there's challenges with, say, hiring a dietitian in a particular home, or if they're in between hiring, the regulations didn't allow for having virtual consults. And that posed to be a challenge in some homes. So we've had, the regulations have been changed in order to support that if they've exhausted all options to have someone on site and they have a backup plan, that there is still an option to provide dietitian virtual consults if deemed necessary. So that still allows for residents to be seen by a registered dietitian in certain situations. Okay, next slide. And another area we've been spending a lot of time in most recently is developing education modules for the sector. We have a partnership with the CLRI, which is the Centers for Learning, Research, and Innovation in Long-Term Care. And we've been working closely with the CLRI to develop training modules that are free and that anyone can access within the sector. We noticed that there was a need for standardized education and education that was readily available. So we're trying to support that. We have two different sets of modules that will be available. Currently, there's two modules that have been released already, and they're available through Surge Learning. So anyone that already has access to Surge Learning should be able to access these modules. Anyone that doesn't use Surge Learning, all you have to do is email OSNAC, which I'll be providing the email a bit later in the presentation, and we provide you with a login so that you can access these modules. The two modules that are available through Surge, one is called Overview of Ontario Long-Term Care and Food Services, and another is called Diets, Food Textures, and Fluid Consistencies in Long-Term Care. So these education modules are geared towards food services, but can also be provided to those working on frontline, like PSWs, those that are involved in dining, so that it can enhance understanding and basic components within the nutrition and hydration program. So that's currently available now. We're also working on, through the CLRI, 3 other modules that will be available through them. And those modules we're hoping will be finished by, I think, mid to late spring. I've just seen the most recent kind of final drafts come out, so they're almost ready to go. And though the 3 different modules don't have confirmed titles yet, but one will be focusing on the food service team and resident dining experience, dysphagia and eating safely, as well as the diets, food textures, and fluid consistencies. So we're very excited that those will be coming out shortly, and those will be available to anyone to access. As a result of the working with the CLRI, the OARC and Devora herself, who's on the line today, worked with us to create a video about kind of highlighting the resident dining experience in long-term care. And that video is going to be incorporated into this training, but we're also hoping to continue to share this video clip when we do our presentations, just to continue to highlight resident perspective and feeling about dining. And we do have the video here today, so we'll just take a few moments to show you that now.
Thank you so much, Heather. And Devorah is here, the star of this video.
Yes.
She is in voiceover mode. You will recognize her voice on the video that you're about to see. It's a bit of a sneak peek. So thank you so much, Devorah, for being here to screen this video with our audience today, and to provide your super valuable insight as always. We really appreciate you, Devorah.
My pleasure, Stephanie. Hi, my name is Devorah, and I am a resident in a long-term care home. Since moving to my new home, I find myself looking forward to mealtimes. It's so much more than the food on the plates. It's really about an all-over experience and connection with others. A calm environment and relaxed pace in a dining room is so important. I appreciate when the staff slow down and take time to get to know me. They greet me by name and they know what I like and dislike. When I see staff working together to make mealtime enjoyable and have everything I need, it really means the world to me.
Thank you so much, Devorah. That was
No,
it was excellent. Like it's a quick clip, but it really highlights some key areas that we can still focus on. Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's all right. So that particular video clip is going to be incorporated into the education, and then we're hoping to continue to share that clip just to continue to remind everyone of a resident's perspective related to dining. So Devorah, we really appreciate all the effort that you put into that, and we're hoping to continue to share that widely. Let's go to the next slide.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Okay, so now I'm going to just talk a little bit about OSNAC's current focus. So our current focus is on a few more challenging pieces of advocacy. We're looking at some areas that will require quite a bit more work and attention in order to attempt to advance forward. So the key areas that we're focusing on now is looking at our food budget for long-term care. We want to attempt to increase funds in the nutrition support food budget. We want to propose a kind of an annual review on this particular funding envelope. We've had increases periodically over the years. We've also had some years where there hasn't been any increase at all. So we want to try to push for consistency for evaluating this particular funding with evidence-based assessments, but knowing that there would be what we would promote is an annual review. And then looking at also removing some things from that funding envelope that we are suggesting that shouldn't be in it, which would include oral nutritional supplements like Boost and Ensure and so on. Currently, they are in the food funding envelope, which we'll talk a little bit about later in the presentation. But looking at streamlining what that funding envelope covers. We also want to try to tackle the staffing side of things within the food services and dietary departments. So looking at trying to enhance meal service and dining by adding funding to the dietary staff. We also want to do that because OSNAC believes that if we have more staff to focus on dining who are considered more dining experts in the food service area, then that would leave more time for the PSWs to focus on providing care rather than them focusing on also providing good dining service. So obviously it's still a team approach, but if we have more food service related staffing, then they can take on more of that dining experience focus, and PSWs can focus more so on the care that's provided during that time. So that's obviously our goal, and we're continuing to work on advocating in that area. We're also advocating for more time for the nutrition manager. Currently, the regulations outline a certain calculation for the time for registered dietitians, as well as the other food service related staff. So we're looking at those calculations, trying to increase dietitian time as well, so that there's more focus on the nutrition side of things and individualized care planning for residents that may require that. And then looking at more hours specifically for cooks in long-term care. So next slide. So that's obviously a pretty big task. Asking for a lot more dollars is something that will take some time and energy. So we're ready to kind of put our focus there. One of the things that we're doing to help us collect data that we can share about what's going on within the sector is we currently have a survey that's still actually open. It's a long-term care sector survey addressing staffing and nutrition funding in long-term care. So it was released February 26th. It's still open as of right now. So if anybody on the call right now is a member of a long-term care home that has knowledge about food service staffing or the food budget, if you're on the leadership team or the food service team, or if you're in the corporate management world and you want to fill out this survey, we would really appreciate it. As of last week, I believe we've had about 124 homes provide feedback, which is great. So if there's anyone else that would like to, it's open. You just need to go to the OSNAC website, and there is a link there to the survey. The purpose of the survey is to gather feedback from the sector directly so that we can actually outline the specific challenges that pertain to these two areas, the staffing and the food budget. And then also to evaluate how homes feel about the current funding, providing us with specific data. We have anecdotal evidence that suggests that the current food budget doesn't work well as it is, but just gathering some more data to support what's currently happening in the sector and how well homes feel that food budget is reflective of what they need is information that we need to support moving this advocacy forward. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. So the key area of focus, as I mentioned, so looking at staffing shortages in the food service roles, impacts of residents' access to nutritious and well-balanced meals, and identifying areas where improvement is needed. And we want to try to provide recommendations to the Ministry of Long-Term Care about reviewing and adjusting the funding in both those areas, and advocate for better support to ensure residents receive the best nutrition and care that they can. Why it matters for residents and families, we're obviously wanting to advocate for high quality meals, for better health and well-being in general, and we want to try and strengthen the care environment by addressing staffing and funding gaps, and that includes food services specifically. So we're also continuing to kind of build on our partnerships in advocacy. We did develop a letter with the OARC, and we did submit that to the ministry back in September, and that focused on dietary staffing funding. And we have met with the ministry in some way, shape, or form once or twice since then, because there's some changes in we've just had the election finish, and where there is, trying to find out who we're going to be communicating with. That has, it's taken a little bit more time for us to kind of progress with that, but we're hopeful that we can continue to work on that and move forward. And then the survey that we currently have out will add data in addition to that letter to try and support change. And we're continuing to build our relationships and partnerships with the Ministry of Long-Term Care and advocate for enhanced services, as I mentioned. And we're currently drafting a letter that focuses specifically on the food budget. So we've sent that one related to the staffing funding. We also have another one in the works that will pertain to the food funding specifically. And we can continue to connect with other sector leaders to discuss potential partnerships. We're always open to meeting with anyone and talking to them about these advocacy efforts. Thank you. So I'll just take a moment just to thank our partners. Obviously, we're appreciative of the OARC and the other partners that we've made along the way. We do appreciate the support. Next slide. And then we do have sponsors as well. OSNAC, as I mentioned, is a volunteer group. So we do have sponsors that do allow us to do some of the work that we do. So we do want to take a moment and really thank them for their efforts as well. Move to the next slide. Thank you. So where do you find OSNAC resources? So as I mentioned, we do have a website. It's osnac-fnat.com. It's free at this time to anyone. We have lots of different resources available on that website, which includes best practice documents. We have information about menu planning in general, and then we have 11 different kind of nutrition or clinical related topics. We have 3 that pertain to food services and kind of food production that are available. And some of them come with customizable tools, resources that you can download, sample policies, sample letters and things like that that you can use. And you can access all that from the website. We also have other documents and training materials that are available on the website. And we try our best to update these resources as frequently as we can. And we also share presentations there. We have social media. We have Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, so feel free to connect with us there as well. And then we do have an OSNAC email. It's osnac.fnat@gmail.com, and we're happy to take any questions through that email, or if there's some kind of questions related to ministry findings or best practices. We've tried to address those as best we can to the best of our abilities. So feel free to reach out. So how can residents get involved? There may be other suggestions that residents might have specifically, but some that I wanted to share would be even just speaking with family and friends and trying to encourage them to support the advocacy efforts as well. Reaching out to policymakers regarding food service funding or changes in long-term care, sharing your experiences with your family and friends to help them understand what you're going through, and then having them help with the advocacy can be beneficial. Can join Residents Council if you're not already a member. That's something that we would strongly encourage, to have your voice heard, represent fellow residents by bringing food service concerns to management and advocating for better nutrition and staffing through Residents Councils. You can engage in a letter writing campaign. So on behalf of residents, writing letters or signing petitions to the Ministry of Long-Term Care and urging them to support improvements in the food service side of things related to funding can be helpful. You can also collaborate directly with your food service leadership teams. And I know that a lot of residents and homes already do this, but looking at ways where we can maybe think outside the box to connect with each other. So how can food service leadership teams reach out, and also residents reach out to those teams to offer feedback? That's an area where communication we can sometimes struggle with, looking at what might work for residents within your home, and residents advocating for what they might need to their food service teams can be helpful. And requesting to learn about the processes. Some homes are providing some education to councils or to food committees, looking at maybe expanding that, doing kind of traveling road shows to the neighborhoods or home areas, doing kitchen tours, things like that might help to enhance communication between residents and food service teams, so that there's a better understanding of what residents within the home would like. And then advocating through resident associations, so like the OARC, pushing for policy change, becoming kind of higher level members to provide your feedback on behalf of your homes, to build partnerships, to share that information so that we can share that with the ministry as well. Next slide, thank you. So that's the kind of the advocacy piece of the presentation. And now we're just going to switch over to more of the education side. Please feel free to enter questions in the Q&A box if you do have any questions so far. We'll have some time at the end of the presentation to go over those. So we're going to switch gears and talk about just food service systems in general. This may not pertain exactly to each home, so I'm just providing an overview of how things tend to work, but just so you have a better understanding of the kind of the funding and the procurement and purchasing side, and as well as talking a bit about waste. Okay. So how is food funding spent? So we mentioned that we're looking at advocating for more dollars in this funding envelope. Currently, this funding amount is $13.07 per resident per day. And the concerns that are identified within long-term care is that this funding is not keeping up with inflation. There's no formal annual review process for this particular dollar amount, so it's not something that's necessarily kept up with the need. And factors affecting our ability to control food costs include, providing resident preferences. Everyone's preferences might be different. So trying to accommodate that with the 1307 can be challenging. Meeting special diet requirements or texture requirements for those that might have diagnoses or challenges that might require special modification, as well as just rising food costs in general. We know that food costs are on the rise, and that's something that, we're all having difficulty keeping up with. So trying to support regular review of this funding envelope would be very necessary. So the nutrition manager carefully considers costs, nutrition content, quality, and resident preferences when purchasing a food menu or purchasing the food for the menu. So this is something that sometimes one area may swing more depending on what the focus is. We should be trying to incorporate all of these things when we're evaluating food items, but it can be challenging. It's not something that is often easy to do. Okay, next slide. So with regards to food purchasing, most homes order from kind of large food distributors at wholesale prices to try to keep the costs down. So example, Cisco or Gordon Food Services are commonly used. And within that, homes may have a contracted service or a purchasing group that they use in order to help negotiate for lower prices. So this is more of like bulk purchasing power in order to keep the costs down if a wide variety of places are ordering those same types of items. There's some pros to that because it can keep the costs down. There might be some limitations there because sometimes these contracts can be a little bit more rigid, especially if they're not we can't negotiate them if they're like time specific. So we might not be able to negotiate changes in a certain period of time. So it may limit at times options based on what we've agreed to purchase. But that does allow for quite a variety of items to be included often in these contracts. And it does help to improve quality control and safety when you have that bulk purchasing power. All manufacturers and distributors must be licensed and provide refrigeration and freezing sections of their delivery trucks. So obviously we need to maintain proper delivery and storage of these items. And then most homes provide a mixture of cooking from scratch and use of convenient items, and that can depend on the home itself. Some may do more scratch cooking and some may do slightly less. It may depend on a variety of factors, labor or equipment, what they have available, what resources they have available to them. So there may be kind of a variety of what's provided depending on the home. So what does the food funding cover? So that $13.07 per resident per day covers all food for meals and snacks that are listed on the menu. So this includes all menu substitutions for special diets, textures, or religious or cultural accommodations, or any kind of special or ethnic foods that are brought in. All ingredients that go into those recipes, herbs, spices, oils, sauces, dressings, all the condiments, and all the bells and whistles there that would be included in the menu. All drinks that are offered throughout the day. This would include any specialty items like thickening agents that are used to thicken products for those residents that might have some swallowing challenges. And it currently includes all nutritional supplements that are offered to provide higher calories or protein. This includes any variety, whether they're served in drink form, pudding form, or powders. Includes any food and drinks that are used by nurses to administer medications, and any tube feed formulas. So if a resident is on a tube feed, all of their food or their formula that's provided in that tube feed is under this cost umbrella as well. Also, just to mention show plates too, if people are using show plates, some homes are doing that. That additional food is provided for those show plates, and then that would obviously have to be covered under that food funding umbrella. So if we look at food production and choice, every resident in the dining room should have choice at meals. And this is something that's outlined in the Long-Term Care Act. Everyone's definition of choice is probably slightly different. You know, if you were to ask me what I wanted, you know, at lunch or dinner and what my expectations are, they might be different from, say, Devorah's expectations on what your adequate level of choice would be. So we need to try to seek that feedback on what residents in general want to see within our homes. And the the changes to the menu regulations did allow for some of that flexibility, obviously ensuring that residents are still offered choice based on what they would like. So the nutrition manager, or those that are involved in the food production, have to estimate the amount of food that's required for each meal service. And this can be quite challenging. This is not something that is an easy task. There's lots of factors that can affect what people choose on what day and when. But it's their job to try to guesstimate how much to send so that we don't run out of something, how much to send so that we don't have a lot of food waste afterwards. So some of the things that we can do is we can look at forecasting and using tools to try to determine what tends to be a popular item, what tends to be an item that maybe isn't enjoyed as much. Could we look at changing that item off of the menu, or do we need to adjust our counts so that we're sending a little bit more of something or a little bit less of something? Oftentimes homes have a percentage split of what they will send. Maybe their first choice is sent at 65% or 70%, and their second choice is sent at 35 or 40%, depending on how much extra they're sending. So that would be up to the home to determine what the usage is like, what the popularity is like. And sometimes that's easier to do than others. This is not something that's often simple, but it can be something that we can tighten up to try to improve choice and reduce waste in general. So we can also look at waste audits. What is coming back, how much is coming back, and adjusting from there. And then obviously, most importantly too, is seeking feedback from our residents and our staff to find out how is the meal enjoyed, what is being chosen most often. Maybe one home area is different than another, one neighborhood is different than another. So can we make changes to support that? So that's something that the leadership teams or the nutrition managers would need to take a look at. Next slide. So oftentimes we do need to send a little bit extra. There might be a buffer of 10 to 15% that we send to a particular home area because we don't want to run out of food. So it's impossible for us to not have any waste, but our goal would be to try to reduce the amount of waste that we have and try to be as predictive as we possibly can, knowing that people's choice can still fluctuate. There's something too called menu fatigue, when you have a menu that's getting close to changing maybe to the next menu cycle, and people are maybe tired of a few of the choices that have been on, or maybe they always chose the first choice, but now they're choosing the second choice. That's something that sometimes you can't always plan for, but it is something to be aware of, that as the menu cycle progresses, people's choice might change as we move forward. So if homes are using show plates as well, this will be sent as extra servings. So that will be kind of a buffer amount that's sent, because we can't serve the show plate food. That's not something that we're allowed to serve, as it drops in temperature and it's not held at a proper temperature based on public health guidelines. So we shouldn't be serving something that's been sitting out on a show plate. And then as along those lines as well, we aren't supposed to be using leftovers. That's not something that we do as per public health guidelines. Once the food goes out, that's it. And then we can look at composting options. So the home that I work at does do composting. Some homes might look at whether or not it's feasible for them to do composting, or looking at donation options if it falls within policies and practices within that home's realm. But that is something too that can be looked at from kind of a production standpoint. Next slide. So looking at food waste and challenges and impact in general. So as I mentioned, overproduction can be an issue if we don't always have a great handle on our forecasting and our popularity of items. So sometimes homes can prepare too much, which does lead to excess waste. Sometimes with changing resident preferences, that can make it difficult to determine how much of what to send. There might be varying tastes or different dietary needs that can sometimes make it difficult to predict the number of servings that are required. Portion sizes can sometimes kind of contribute to these challenges, whereas larger portions might not be appealing to some residents, but we might be providing these portions because they need a certain level of nutrition. So sometimes that doesn't align with residents' appetite, and it can lead to more plate waste. If we look at restrictions, dietary restrictions in general, sometimes if someone has a special diet or special dietary needs, it may limit their food choices, or there may be increased waste if additional choice is provided. So trying to find a balance there can be challenging. And then related to manual adjustments, some homes often rely on manual changes to these, which can be difficult to kind of interpret or stay on top of, which can lead to inefficiencies. It might take more time to do manual tracking, which we all have competing priorities and we might have different resources. So it might be more difficult for us to kind of deal with these challenges when we're tracking them manually. So next slide. So these challenges can have an impact. They can impact our food budget. It can increase our food cost if we're having more waste. That does mean higher costs on things for purchasing and preparing meals. It can put a strain on our resources. We might have a limited budget and we need to try to stretch that further when food waste is not minimized. And then it can be difficult to predict demand, as I mentioned. So changes in residents' appetites or preferences make it hard to plan sometimes for meal quantities throughout the cycle. So that's something that we can potentially stay on top of if we have the resources, but can be challenging to predict demand. And then, as mentioned, just some tracking issues. So if we have limitations with what we can track or when we track, or if we're not actually tracking a particular area, that can lead to some production challenges because what we're sending might not be what we actually need. Next slide. So what are some ways that we can kind of improve food waste in long-term care? Looking at ways where we can streamline or better plan for our forecasting. So any way that we can use data and past meal consumption, what happened on the menu cycle the last time it was on, to try to determine the trends and predict what people might choose, and doing that as accurately as possible. So there are established tools and strategies that can be used. There's audits available to determine this information. Would suggest regularly reviewing resident preferences when possible, and those that are on dietary restrictions, to plan for these meals better, ensuring that those residents are enjoying the choice that they receive, but also looking at ways that you can streamline what you're sending. Formally implementing smaller portion options is sometimes what can happen if larger portions or the portion that's on the menu isn't matching resident appetites, as long as there's the dietitians involved in determining that there's adequate nutrients and that the information is care planned to cover us from the regulatory perspective. There's no reason why a resident can't receive a smaller portion if that's within their care plan. And then those smaller portions can be incorporated into our count tracking so that we're not sending too much food in that particular case. Next slide. Sometimes increasing staff training can help. So training the kitchen or food service staff to try to kind of understand our scoop sizes and quantities we should be sending, or how to interpret the counts or the percentages that we have listed to try to reduce waste. Educating the staff on the importance of food waste reduction can be helpful, and maybe they might be able to share some sustainable practices from their perspective. There may be something that they see that we're doing on the food service side that we could improve on, just by seeking their feedback directly from those working on the front line. Other ways we can try to improve is implementing formal waste tracking systems. The use of technology is something that's improving. At the home that I am at, we use kind of an online ordering system and electronic production counts. So those can be changed fairly quickly. I think there's quite a few homes that have switched to an electronic system, but there are still homes that are doing more of a manual system. This is obviously something that can't change overnight and would need to be looked at from a resource allocation perspective and a budget perspective, but looking at transitioning to technology to help can really improve reducing waste and ensuring that your counts are as accurate as possible. And you can also look at electronic more tracking systems if you can't use an electronic production system, just to help enhance your audits and your understanding of what you might require. And then reviewing the information. That's often what takes a lot of time, is when you're doing audits to determine what the usage is, you do need to take the time to review that, and the resource allocation may be challenging to achieve that. Looking at strategies to make that as efficient as possible will really go a long way, looking at adjusting those counts when there are areas that may be struggling with increased waste within the home. Next slide. Encouraging residents to provide feedback. So this kind of goes back to seeking to understand what the residents would like. And we always want to make sure that we're doing our best to achieve that. So regularly asking residents for input on meal satisfaction, their preferences, ensuring we're meeting their needs, whether that's informal or formal, but as simple as doing meal rounds and talking to people about their experiences can really go a long way. Visually kind of observing the meal service and seeing what's left over and having discussions about it can really help. And using the feedback to make adjustments to menu choices can really help reduce waste. And then partnering with local charities. As I mentioned, it is a possibility to donate any safe, unused food to local charities to minimize waste. Obviously, that's as deemed appropriate and if it's in line with your corporate policies. But there is ways where you could potentially partner with local shelters or local facilities that supply food to help support other members of the community. So at least when there is some food waste, you know that it is going somewhere that can be of good use, in addition to looking at composting options if there isn't already composting options in place. Okay. Excellent. So that was kind of a quick overview of food systems in general and just talking about how kind of the ins and outs of the food service department and as it pertains to purchasing, funding, and waste challenges. And there's obviously a lot more that we could share, but we just wanted to provide that overview and thank everyone for their interest. It's now time for the Q&A component of the webinar. I'm not sure if there was any questions that came through.
We did have a few questions so far, and hopefully we'll get a few more questions. Before we go into those, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Heather. This presentation today, I know it's not over yet, but I really enjoyed how you spoke about all of the wonderful things that OSNAC is doing that maybe our audience might not have been aware of. It's nice to know that an association like yours exists to help keep this issue of food and nutrition and long-term care at the forefront. And then the education part, something I learned, I didn't realize that the $13.07 also covered the drinks and I guess applesauce that the nursing team uses for medications. Something I had never even thought of. Thank you for sharing all of that great information. I'll have to go back and re-watch this presentation because I'm sure I've missed some great info. So we do have some questions here in the Q&A box. One of them, I think you might have answered, but if you could just for the group, who decides the food temperatures being used in long-term care homes?
So the food temperatures are set out through public health guidelines. So long-term care homes would have public health inspections that would allow us to then perform our duties as a food service provider. We need to follow all public health guidelines, and each area has their own public health unit that would do the individual inspections for the food service part of the homes.
Okay, thank you. There is some interest in the question and answer box about finding the OSNAC survey. So is that just going on to the website, or is there a specific link for the survey?
So when you go to the website, a box will pop up, and in that box it says take me to survey or take me to the website. So if you click on that take me to the survey link, you can get to that directly. I can also see if I can send you the link, Stephanie. I don't know if that's something that we could include.
Yeah, that would be great. We could include it with the slides. Perfect.
Wonderful. Yes, I can do that. I'm not sure how much longer it will be open for, but it is still open now. So I'll do my best to get that out soon. But yes, if you just go directly to the website, it takes a few seconds, but then a box will pop up and then it will say, take me to survey.
Okay, thank you. There's a question about who decides what the normal portion size is.
So we have nutrition guidelines within long-term care that we have to follow the dietary reference intakes for a certain age group. And we have to try to meet that for the masses. So it's a population-based recommendation for all of our micronutrients and our macronutrients, which would include things like calories, protein, carbohydrates, and then also our other micronutrients like iron, vitamin D, calcium, all of those things. So as the dietitian in the home, part of my role is reviewing the menu to ensure that the menu is not only enjoyable, but also meets nutrition needs based on the Long-Term Care Act. So there's sometimes, it's sometimes difficult to find a balance between portion sizes for enjoyment and then portion sizes to meet nutrition needs. And we recognize that. we have to prescribe a certain amount in order to meet nutrition needs, but that doesn't mean that individual changes can't be made thereafter. So if someone really enjoys small portions, but what we're serving to try to meet the dietary needs or the nutrition needs is just way too much, the dietitian can make changes to that person's individual plan of care so that it meets their needs from a portion perspective. We just need to have specific documentation to say that that was done. We can't necessarily just change the portion sizes more arbitrarily, because we do have to show that we're trying to focus on nutrition from a population-based perspective. So I don't know if that makes sense, but it is 100% possible to adjust portion sizes from the base menu if the base menu is not enjoyed.
Thank you. That's great, because we get a lot of comments about, you know, the scoop sizes, and it's too much food on the plate and it's all going to waste. And so knowing that individual changes can be made is really great. Thank you. There is a question about qualifications. So just to get your thoughts, do you think that qualifications would be returning to food service workers and Red Seal for dietary team members and cooks?
So there was a change to the wording in the regulations. I'm wondering if this is what that's referring to. So originally, food service workers, it was mandated for them to have the food service worker course. That part of the legislation has been relaxed a bit because of our staffing challenges and shortages within the sector. That was something that was promoted as it's still considered opportune or a best practice to have that food service worker program. But it doesn't necessarily have to be mandatory depending on what your corporation decides as per the regulations, so that if there are staffing challenges, we can still hire someone that has a lot of food service related experience, just might not be in the long-term care sector, or it might not be the exact same as the food service worker program, but it doesn't limit your ability to offer that job to that person now, because there's been that flexibility added to the regulations. So we would still strongly encourage you to focus on people that are qualified for the position, but it does open up the hiring pool to those that have food service experience.
Perfect. Thanks, Heather. And we've seen that in other sections of the Act as well, with some of the nursing team members and other roles in the home. Thank you. Devorah, I wonder if you feel the same way, but there are a couple of questions in the question and answer box right now about the idea of donating foods, leftover or excess foods that weren't consumed. What do you think about that? Because there's some positive action here in the question and answer box.
I think it's a great idea. It really bothers me to see all the food going to waste. And it's not only from this home, it was also in the home in Toronto. And I did mention to the dietary manager in Toronto, why can't we donate the leftover food? Unless, instead of you throwing it in the garbage, why can't we give it to somebody who really needs it? And they said they couldn't do that because there was infection control, temperature. The food doesn't stay, what they say, in good condition because they can't do it right away. So they never did that. And here I'm having a lot of problems with, I guess, the dietary manager. So I haven't broached that yet. But in Toronto, they said they couldn't do it.
Okay.
So I think it's something that, I'm not going to begin to say it's an easy feat. It's not something that's easy to achieve. I know I'm with the regional municipality of Durham, and for a long time we wanted to donate, but there was a lot of challenges we had to work through. but we were able to kind of work through our practices, go through our policies, look at our current procedures, and come up with a way that we were able to satisfy all regulatory requirements, and then work with a group that also comes to pick up the donated food. So there is a possibility of developing partnerships. And I think it's, it's one of those things that does take a lot of legwork in the beginning. But if the home, does have some existing partnerships or some connections, it could be something they could work at building at, and then revising their policies. It is possible. It's just one of those things that sometimes can take some time. But yeah, it's something we would strive for sure.
Heather, and are there, in your experience, some items that you could start with if it's not possible to donate, everything that's on the menu? Are there some examples of things that could be easily donated, or is there, a bigger barrier to get across with just getting this idea in place?
Yeah, I think it might be to just challenges, like thinking outside the box. It's always difficult to kind of go down a different path, one that we're not used to, or one that might be a little bit scary. So, looking at other homes that may be doing this practice, or talking to them so that there's this comfort level there, or if there is a partnership that you want to expand on, maybe discussing it with them about opportunities that could work. We don't donate every single food item, because there's some food items that just don't transfer well, or there's some food items that might not be enjoyed, like some of our modified textures. And we also don't donate too much if our waste is under control. So it's kind of a catch-22. We want to control our waste, but we also want to donate, but we're not going to produce more to donate. So, there is sometimes where we're not donating that much, but it is nice to be able to donate some surplus if we do have it, and working closely with those partners.
Thank you so much. And this hour has flown by. It is 3 p.m. And thank you to everyone who participated as an attendee, and to Heather and Devorah especially for being here with us today and sharing this awesome information that I'll have to watch again and collect all of the interesting tidbits from. If there are residents in your home who or team members who didn't have an opportunity to join today, you can let them know that the recording is available on our website, and you can watch it together and have a discussion group about what you've learned. Thank you so much for being here, and please take a moment to fill out the evaluation for this webinar that will pop up on your screen when you close your Zoom session. Once again, thank you so much, and we'll see you next month for Webinar Wednesday. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Stephanie. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much, Deborah. You take care.
Yeah, you too.